continuing on with the Context Mini web part. In this video, we're actually going to layer in some of the UI components. I feel that this may take over 2 to 3 videos to get through. So let's just take it one video at a time and make sure we're doing things correctly and learning along the way. Okay, so prior to recording this video, I just received the Windows 10 Creators Update. Hopefully this doesn't add any snags into the process, but just I wanted to put that disclaimer out there just in case we run into a little issue. Okay, so here on our TFS board, we're working on this task here. As we saw in previous videos, we have these 4 tasks we came up with in order to create the mini dev, the mini context web part. And if we go into this task here, we can go and take a look at what we are actually building using. So as you can see in this mock-up here, as it's loading, still thinking about loading. Okay, so as we have in this mock-up here, the key contacts, this is the piece that we want to build. So I think in this video we will, I've went through this process a couple times already. I think I have a handle on it. Still, there's some unanswered items that I still have to research. But let's go ahead and get into it. So the first thing we have to do is to create our SharePoint project. We're just going to call it Mini Contacts. I'm going to come over here in the command prompt and let's see here. We're under code and SPFx. And let's just make a new directory. Let's just call it Mini Contacts. And then let's change into that directory and kick it off. Now, before I do this, I just want to remind you, I know prior to, like, the tic-tac-toe was done probably 6 or 7 weeks ago, probably 6 weeks ago. Since then, the SharePoint Development Framework went GA. Obviously, there are updates to the NPM tooling. There's updates to the Yeoman and the Gulp tools. So we just want to make sure that, before you start, and I went through this process already, just make sure you're getting the latest generator for SharePoint, and then you're updating all your tooling. So we're dealing with the latest and greatest. The one change from the tooling that we had before was that before there was a requirement to install TypeScript, and just doing some research with the release candidate, that's no longer a prerequisite, so you don't have to worry about the TypeScript piece. So what I'm gonna do here, I'm just do yo Microsoft /SharePoint and to go ahead and create a SPF projects for this. So we want to keep mini context as the solution. Yep, use the current folder. There is an issue. I do want to highlight this, and it may just be my machine, but I kind of doubt it. But anyway, the React project is missing 2 to 3 core dependencies. There's some TypeScript references that are missing. There is the SP web part, and then like the SP core modules that are missing. If you do the Node JavaScript web framework, it seems to install all of them, but for the React, those guys are missing. So what I had to do was, prior to this video, I created a Node JavaScript framework project just so that I can copy and paste those missing modules and paste them into my React project. So if you run into that issue where you're getting a wet squiggly and it doesn't build, if you track it down, that may be your case. So let's just call this guy Mini Contacts, and then description, use this web part to display key contacts for your site. All right, just hit enter. And again, this is going to display contacts. This is going to be driven by a SharePoint list. And what we're doing, we're allowing the site manager to list in 6 or 7 people within the SharePoint list, and then take that list and display it in the contact card as displayed here. Okay, so while that's loading, let's take a look at the Office UI Fabric. So this is the one I'm very familiar with Bootstrap and some of the other frameworks. Not that familiar with the Office UI Fabric, but I kind of get the sense of, you know, it has your grid system, it has your icons and all this other good stuff. But the one that we're going to really jump into is the components. Now, as we saw before, we have a very simple layout. Now we can do this. This is, I mean, I think they call these cards, right? I know there's for certain a document card. I did not see a personal card or people card within the Office UI Fabric. So this is something that we may have to piece together. But you really don't need a component for this. But I wanted to explore and work with the Office UI Fabric components firsthand, so I'm kind of forcing that issue. And if we run into an issue, then we can back out and then take a different route. But basically, you just have your profile pic. You can style this with CSS. You have the person's name, probably like an H1 or H2 tag. And then you have the department or job title, sorry. And then that has the styling and then the office number, right? So very, very simple. But exploring the Office UI fabric and within these components, I went through each one of these. Like at first, I took a look at FacePal. So, oh, maybe we can do it with FacePal, right? Because I am listing out users in a collection, like in a list of here. But this seems to be, I don't know. When at first glance, what was needed, because they said really this is reserved for using this for highlighting people that have access to something. And you see that a lot in the modern UI and the modern SharePoint. So like members of a group, you will see this type of listing, this type of layout. So I kind of went past the face pal, and then the next one I was looking at, oh, my screen is, uh-oh, there go my update issue. Here we go. Okay, here we go. What's going on? Hold on, guys. I'm gonna pause this video until I can figure out what's going on. Okay, told me that I lost Wi-Fi, but now it's back. Okay, so I went past a FacePal and landed on this guy here, the persona component. And this looks very similar to the FacePal, with the exception of, especially if you remove the personal data or persona data, I really just have these icons, and then it just have the presence icon, right? So based on their Skype presence, I mean, this is as you can see with this icon, once we get into the details of this could be anything, right? I mean, even if you're not connected to Skype, if you want to have this power through some SQL backend that has a flag on the different statuses of people, that's not even related to Skype, you can control this. But this is the icon, or this is the rendering that that type of solution have. And here, it seems like you can list these out. The only thing with this layout is, one, everything has initials, and so it wasn't clear to me that these are just placeholders in the event the image URL was not valid or was missing. It would default to this, so it seems like we have access to that. And then the other piece with this component, compared to the requirement that we have, is that all the details are here on the right. And I just expect that we can turn, like, we're not going to use presence in this scenario, so we can turn that on or off. But if that's something that the business wants to turn on later, we can easily add that attribute in, especially once we figure out how to pull that in using the REST API. So this is going to be our guide. So we're going to use the persona component to get that layered in. And then I think we're going to do a mix of, if you look at styles and then layout, we're going to have to leverage this grid system to kind of get us that 4 across or 6 across. Because we're dealing with factors of 12, we can't get the 5 that we have in the UI. So we may have to go back to the business and say, hey, I can give you 4, but not 5. And then in the web part properties, we're going to have to control how many you display per row. Okay. All right. So let's do this. Let's see where we are with our project. Okay, so we're all set. So let's bring up Visual Studio Code. And this guy, let's see if we run into the same issue that we ran into before. Many contacts. Yep, here's my red squigglies. So odd, so odd. So I figured out where this is, the at Microsoft library. All these libraries are being housed. That's under the Node module. You can see the at Microsoft option. And then these guys are supposed to be here. So there should be a SP Core library, which is missing. There should be a SP Web Part library, which is missing. So no fear. I have a no JavaScript framework here. So if you jump into Reveal Explorer, let all my SPFx. So this is here. My M contacts is my no JavaScript framework. So I just go into the modules, go into that same section, and then pick up the guys that are missing. And this one's going to be SP Web Part Base and then SP Core Library. So let me just copy that. Go back in here, mini contacts, here, here. And then I go off to the right here and enough white space to paste these in. So I'm not accidentally putting them into a subfolder. Okay, so that's that. So now if I go back here, and all I'm gonna do is just select a different file, then go back to that web parts file, and now the red squigglies are gone. Now if I go back to the command line and I do a gulp, just to make sure this guy compiles, this is the other error I was receiving. It's a TypeScript error where it says it can't find definition files for certain components. So I wasn't going to chase those down. So all I'm going to do is go back into my no JavaScript framework project and copy this entire TypeScript folder and then paste this guy here off to the right. And now it's going to go to compare. It's going to give me a prompt. These project files are huge. I mean, I think there's like 70,000 files and like 280 meg for one project. Humongous. Anyway, so skip the files that already exist. So it's going to do a delta drop. Now that's there. Let me do my gulp. And this should compile successfully. Again, I ran into this problem again. It took me a minute to figure out what was going on, what was missing, and then I came up with the idea of looking at a different project template, and then was able to patch it up that way. Okay, so let's do this. So now that we have all the pieces to the project that should have came with the project, so now that we have that all patched up, let's make sure this thing is working before we start layering in our custom stuff. Now, one of the things that they've done, and I think this was a drop or two before the release candidate for the SharePoint framework, was they made everything SSL. So when you launch the local host, it's HTTPS, which is looking for a certificate. So this line right here that says, hey, it's not signed, but trusted. So that way we don't get the weird browser errors and all this other good stuff. So this is going to trust that guy. And now we're ready for a gulp serve. Now that trust dev cert, that gulp trust dev cert, you only need to do that once per project. So, as we kill this and then do multiple gulp serves as we're kind of going through the dev process, there's no need to do the trust again. All right, so this looks good. Standard boilerplate web part jazz. Let's double check our one property, our one description property that's wired up, and that seems to be responding. Okay, so we're good to go. Now, let's take a look at the project. So I pop open Visual Studio Code here, and in the web part, you have, especially in the React project, you have this one component that they're wiring up, and basically that's going to be your starting point. And I'm not sure how to structure this, right? I know that I read on the React tutorial, and we kind of talked about this in our tic-tac-toe video, where there is a food for thought. There was a best practice that said, hey, dedicate one of these components for all your getting data, right, or posting data and put and merging data. Dedicate one component for all that jazz, to interacting and pulling real data. All your child components or descendants from that, pass that data in using properties, right? Or, and then controlling the events and all this other good stuff. They say they call them stateless components. They said you want to have more stateless components in your project than ones that that actually manage data and holding state within their own. So it's kind of like this push and react to events type model. So I think what I'm gonna do, let's try to model out that set, and we're not gonna get into this in this video because we're only dealing with the UI. Um, I think we want to reserve this guy here, our out of the box component that we get as soon as we fire up the project. Let's reserve this one for our data collecting. And then what we'll do, and obviously we're gonna clean this up a little bit, but I think for just testing this out and feeling good about it, we're gonna put all of our component classes into one file. Obviously, this is not ideal. You want to separate these into separate files and bring them in as imports and all this other good stuff. But for this demo, and let's just play around with it until we start to feel comfortable. Now, what I'm gonna do, just to save time and to make sure that I'm not wasting time with typos and all this other good stuff, I'm going to fire up another project that has this halfway done DLC contacts. All right, and I'm gonna just pull this off to the side in another window. And I'm gonna try not to copy and paste, but I do want to make sure that we're not getting stuck on syntax stuff that just wasting time and we're not really learning much. Um, let's see here. Okay, so what I've done, the first thing we want to do, let's get rid of all of this boilerplate text. Let's delete this div all the way out. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna start with a container. So our new stuff will come here. Let's get it H1. Let's call it mini contacts. Okay, and then underneath this header is where we're gonna actually start to do our classes. Now, let's create a class. We'll call this contact cards. Again, this is gonna be our first child class, our child component, and as any other React component, this is just going to stand off the base class, the React component. See, here I go, wasting time typoing. And then again, I'm sticking with the any parameter until we come into a need to where we need to change that. Okay, and there's many examples, especially in the SharePoint example or the Microsoft example, to where, as you can see here, they are passing in props and setting it to void versus any. And I don't know what those guys do, so we're going to have to learn that together. So now what we want to do is just do is it public render? No, Deshaun. No, so this is just a render. I didn't say the access type. So just do a render. I always get tripped up on this one. Parenthesis, curly bracket, and then return with parenthesis and semicolon, and then all your divs go here. And as we mentioned in the tic-tac-toe, you only want one HTML outer container, and so that way you don't get any errors. It doesn't like it when there's multiple containers in the return method. Okay, hello from contact card. All right, let's just make sure Shift-Alt-F, the format, let's just make sure that everything is gelling and connected as expected. All right, so the fake stuff is gone, the boilerplate text is gone, many contacts. No. I still don't have this guy. Oh, you have to add the tag. All right, so let's do contacts, contact card. There we go. Close tag. Now I should have the HTML that's inside of the actual component. All right, good. So that's wired up. So far, nothing earth-shattering there. Just a nice review with creating components and calling that from your default component that comes with the web part. Now let's do something a little bit more interesting. So let's bring in that persona component from the Office UI fabric. Now this was kind of new to me because the last time we only dealt with styles. So now we get to actually play with a component. These are very, very familiar if you're coming from the C# background. .NET controls, right? You know, .NET controls is um, a pre-boiled set of HTML markup and properties and some other functionality that may be embedded with them. These guys are going to be, at the most part, purely HTML. Some JavaScript, we kind of take a look at that. But that's the ideal, right? It's just, hey, here's the UI component, feed me the properties that you, and set my parameters that you want to display and tweak, and I'll do what I do best by default. So the cool thing about it is I wanted to try to leverage these examples to kind of be shortcut and without having to hunt and try to find some of this stuff. So what I'm gonna do is just copy this import, because this is the only thing that we need to import the persona component within our project, and just simply come up here on the import section and then paste this in. Now, if for some odd reason you need to explore this, right? From where I can tell, the way this is set up is that it gives you all those examples, and then it has they call it the interface, right? The interface is going to give you all the optional events that you can hook into and or properties and a brief explanation on them. So if there's something that you need to use, or if you want to see if the component can do something that the example doesn't give you for free with sample code, then you can do a deep dive here to see what else you can do, right? And then with these enums, like for the persona size, this is an enum, so these are only available values. And the same with the persona presence, these are the available values. And then the initials color, and then I think that's it. So those are your enums. That's at the bottom of your different options. Okay, so so I have this persona brought in. I don't think we're going to use size or presence right now, so I'm going to remove those. So we only want to bring in what we're going to use. And all I need to do, which is pretty cool, is just bring this in as a tag. Right? And I can do a close tag, and not sure what I'm going to get by default. All right? So let's just, we may not get anything. Yep, just a circle. All right, cool. All right, so now we can start loading this guy up. Now, I'm not going to sit here and try to hunt and peck and figure out what's what. I just want to go back to that example, and whatever they're displaying here, first name, last name, title, and the median available. We're not going to do these bottom two. We're not going to do the presence icon. So what do we need for that? So here's an example of their persona. That's the size, that's the presence, and then this is, because they have this little checkbox right here, right? That's something that they're just wired up just for the example of to change or not to change based on the checkbox, right? To show the details or not. So, but this is the interesting piece here, and it kind of threw me off because I felt this was like uh, like for a, I thought it was a continuation, like, hey, this is a dot dot dot. We're not showing the example, just an example persona. Initially, when I took a first glance at it, I thought that was it, not realizing that this is real code. This is a weird syntax that they have that if you want to define certain properties as a constant, you can map those into a constant. Then you use that weird notation to say, okay, for this tag, map these properties within that tag and set them to all those values. And that's what this guy is doing here. So we're not going to do that. I mean, because obviously we're going to start hydrating all of these persona components with JSON data, either a fake JSON and then eventually the real REST API called JSON. So what I want to do, let's just go ahead and copy this guy just to kind of save me a few keystrokes. And then let's go into this persona and paste it in. And what's happening here with the red squigglies, it says, hey, this is the incorrect syntax when you're setting attributes for a tag. So I have to remove all the semicolons, right? And remove the commas. And then this should become happy. All right, let's just do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. All right, so that's that. Optional text, we can leave that to tertiary, 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 tertiary. Anyway, okay, so initial image initials, let's leave that, let's leave that, let's leave that. I'm not sure what's going to happen with this, so let's leave it, give it a try. I think that's it. Let me do a Shift Alt F to format and then save it. And then come over here to my web part. All right, cool. Easy as pie. All right, so we have our name, we have a title. Oh, we do not have available our software engineer. Yeah, we do have software engineer. Oh, we're missing this. Okay. So the cool thing about these components is that you can actually see the rendered HTML. And so far from what I can tell, let's go down to this persona details section. The optional text is actually there, so it's being pushed to the DOM, but it's not being displayed, and there is a CSS none that's hiding that. Okay, so what we're going to have to end up doing, we're going to have to end up overriding this CSS class and then forcing it to a display block or inline or whatever it takes to actually render that. So, which is a cool thing, right? I mean, so if you don't like what you get out of the box, like a couple things that we need to change. One, that we need the image to be at the top, not on the left. There are certain optional properties, I guess, whatever. I think this is tied to the presence because we're not setting the presence attribute. It's not, I guess those two properties are related to that. So it's say, hey, they're not using them, so it's not displaying them, but we're going to have to force it to display in order to get the layout that we're looking for. All right, so, and I think this would be, in our case, the phone number. Right. So that's that. So now let's copy this guy a couple of times just so we can get a couple instances of it. Paste it in. All right, so that looks good other than a repeated text. And the other thing we have to do, we have to change this image URL. So I've been playing around with this. So because the URL is pointing to temp directory workbench HTML, I just find it easier, especially if you're doing relative path for your image source URL, to just dump the images here. And plus, because we're only using them within the workbench, this is not something we want to deploy to the SharePoint tenant when we actually are dealing with live data. It makes sense to dump it inside of the temp folder. So I'm going to create, whoa, what's going on here? What happened? Somehow I was going to create a folder and it executed the search. All right, so new folder, images. And I think I have an image here. Let me see. What does this look like? Looks like nothing. All right. What does it look like? I don't have permissions to view the image. Let's go location. Okay. Yeah, let's just use this Ashley profile pic. And basically what I can do is just go here, copy, and no paste, but I can do reveal and explore, and then paste it this way. All right. And now all I need to do it would be nice if we can just go down here and drag and drop this. Nope, but it thinks I want to open it. Let's do copy path and then paste it in. Yep, all I need is the name. All right. And if I have this correct, this image path would just do a relative URL based on this tip directory, and hopefully this pulls it up as expected. We'll try it out. Because what's happening, the image is invalid, so it's just using the initials. So now that we have a valid image, it actually pops the image there. Okay, we're actually getting close with very little work. I think most of this is researching and educating ourselves on how to use this different tech together. But it seems like once it comes together like a good plan, it works out. It's pretty easy. Okay, so the other thing we have to do now is to display these in columns, right? We don't want this stack. We want our context to go left to right. And the best way to do that is to use the O365, I'm sorry, the Office UI Fabric. Now let's go into the layout, the styles, and then layout. And this is exactly what we did for tic-tac-toe. We just want to take this grid here from the example, pop over here, and now define this as the grid system. And the example that we just pulled out is doing L2 and 12. We don't want that. What do we want? We want 3s, right? 3 is going to give us 4 in a row, right? Yeah, so we want 3s, and that's going to be for medium and up. And then for small, I think we just want 12. So just display 1 per row. All right, so we can get rid of the second column. Get rid of let's open this div up. Close the div. All right, so really what we want to do is just drop our persona here. And we just want to test this out to make sure that this is gridded. That's a word correctly. Let's see. Oh, he doesn't like something. Oh, JSX class name, not class. All right, there we go. All right, so, okay. So we're doing a medium 3, so I get to put 4 on a row, right? All right, so let's do that, and let's clean all this noise up. I lost my way. Let me do a format. Okay. All right, so column 1, 2, 3, and 4. That's going to close that. And we don't need this outer div for now. So let's go ahead and remove this. All right, let's save it. Let's see what we're doing. How do we do? Awesome. 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 Okay. So, so this is where I'm at now. So this is pretty much where I kind of left off with my model project that I have open in another window. And I think what's next, I'm gonna go ahead and end this video because I think 30 minutes is 35 minutes is probably as long as we want to kind of chunk this up into. But I think in the next phase, what we want to do is start to get these dropped in dynamically, and we can do that by using the for loop, right? And I think and this is a cool thing about that tic-tac-toe example, because most of the things that we accomplish in that tic-tac-toe example, we can kind of leverage here to kind of give us along the way. I think the biggest one, and this is something I haven't done yet, is going to be pulling in real REST API JSON data. I think that's going to be towards the end. But I think in the next video, what I want to do is let's tackle moving this icon to the top, right? So we have to go in there and adjust the CSS or overwrite the CSS. We also want to make sure all of our attributes are displayed. And then we can, yeah, I think that's it. And then I think the video after that, let's go ahead and get some live. So the next video, we'll move this image to the top. We'll overwrite CSS to get the other attributes to display. And we want this to be displayed using a sample JSON file. So we can go out there and create a JSON file and then have it do like a fake AJAX call, just so that we can render this HTML in that regard. And then I think once we accomplish that, I really think we have all the big pieces in place, and then we can go API hunting to figure out which APIs or endpoints we need to call to pull in all of the needed data. All right, so that's it for this video. Pretty excited. First time using a component. It seems pretty easy. Starting to get a little bit more comfortable with the React piece of it, and I think we can actually make some magic happen. All right, take care.